Hi, welcome to this astrology report for the weekend of June 6th through June 8th, 2025. I am excited to talk to you about the astrology of this weekend and what it signifies. This has been sort of an exceptional Gemini, Sun in Gemini season. I'm just going to mark this on our calendar here. My hope is always that if you are learning astrology, and interested in following along with the chart, that the little diagrams that I put up here are helpful, and that if you aren't and you just want to hear about the astrology, talk about the astrology, that this video works for you as well. That is always my intention. So yes, we are traveling through the Sun in Gemini season, and this is always a busy time, from late May through late June, right? We're sort of smack in the middle of it right now. And this is always a busy season. There's always a lot of conversations, a lot of curiosity and new things coming in, visits with friends. um, New ideas being sparked. I think when I think of that curiosity piece of Gemini, it's just all these new ideas, wanting to kind of go in a million different directions. And this Jupiter and Gemini season has really been a little extra because we have Jupiter here at the final degrees of Gemini. And so the main aspect that we're actually going to focus on today for this report, the main aspect of the weekend, although I'm going to pull a few other things in here as well, is this Mercury and Jupiter conjunction. Let me go ahead and let the sun be in this magnifier as well, just because it is so significant. But this Mercury-Jupiter conjunction at the final degrees of Gemini is the major transit that we are working with this weekend. And there is something, even though we're still in the middle of Gemini season, there is sort of a culmination energy to this. It marks something of a end of a process when we're looking at the final degrees of a sign. And with Jupiter and Mercury there, the mental energy is just incredibly strong. You know, this is a time where you could be having, like I said, a lot of ideas, a lot of sort of inspired thinking. It's sort of a classic signature of excessive mental energy. Mercury rules Gemini. And Jupiter is always sort of expanding what it touches, adding sort of a breadth to what it's doing, and an optimism as well. So I think that the two of these together can be quite visionary. You know, we can have this visionary thinking, probably about something that we've been working on for a little while. I'll talk about the timing of that in just a second. But that visionary thinking with Mercury and Jupiter combined, that can then cause sort of a bit of a mental leap forward, where you're really seeing a situation with more clarity and sort of able to perhaps make some sort of decision or some sort of a commitment. You know, the final degrees of a sign do carry that sort of wrapping up culmination energy. And then sort of combining that with important ideas makes me think about decisions, about conversations, maybe conversations that have been brewing for a while, that are ready to now reach some sort of a turning point. In terms of timing, it could be a process coming to something of a head that began in the last few weeks or about a year ago when Jupiter entered Gemini. And there could be a little bit of both to this. There's also a weird sort of negativity to this. And I know I just used the word optimism several times, and Jupiter is quite optimistic, but Jupiter is debilitated in Gemini. Jupiter doesn't really love to be in Gemini. Jupiter would rather expand through being in a sign like Sagittarius, and where he can kind of focus a little bit more. Excuse me, taking a drink of water here. In Gemini, all those different ideas coming in, Gemini kind of likes to stay on the surface, Gemini energy. You know, it likes to keep things fun, likes to keep things light. Uh, Short little articles, not big long books, right? And so Jupiter sometimes doesn't really love to be in Gemini, and uh, sometimes I think that this past 13 months that we've had Jupiter here, we've been learning a bit about what we don't want. So part of the clarity that you might be getting, part of the decision, part of the commitment might have something to do with realizing something that you don't want anymore. Yeah, that could be part of where the clarity is coming from. You know, there's also sort of always two sides to a story where Gemini is concerned. So it's sort of important to look at that too, that sort of dual nature of everything. There's sort of the potential for bringing in opposing viewpoints, a negative with an optimism, a knowing what you don't want, but being optimistic at the same time, as these themes that you've been working with, maybe for the last month, maybe for the last year, begin to come to a head, and you begin to have some clarity, some optimism, ready to make a bit of a decision. This is also just a very wonderful time to sort of speak something into existence, as they say. You know, words always carry power, but I think that's a little extra true when we have Mercury conjunct Jupiter. The thoughts that you think even are very, very powerful at this time. It is a really nice time for manifesting, which really just means sort of setting your mind on something to the point that it can't help but show up a bit in your life. As Jupiter gets ready to move into Cancer next week, we're opening up a whole new story. And there's some really healing vibes with Mercury and with Jupiter in Cancer. I just was saying how Jupiter is debilitated in Gemini, and it's actually the opposite in Cancer. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. And this is going to bring in sort of more emotional maturity, feelings of security, warmth, family, doing things in the way that are really right for us, healing, security. For the next 13 months, it's having Jupiter in Cancer ahead is such good news. Astrologically, it really is. It signifies a lot of good things for us. So as we're wrapping up this Jupiter, Jupiter being in Gemini, and we're letting go of what doesn't work, and we're coming to these decisions, and we're balancing harmony with optimism, there's some sort of like letting go, healing, release energy to it as well, just so we can move into that Jupiter and Cancer energy a bit fresh. And as planets move into Cancer, let's take a look at the chart here. As planets move into Cancer right now, and this is going to be true for a lot of June, because we have Jupiter will ingress Cancer, so will Mercury, so will the Sun, and so will the Moon. Eventually, the Moon has to come all the way around first. But by the time we get to the new moon in Cancer at the end of the month, I didn't mean to get rid of all of that. But by the time we get to the new moon in Cancer at the end of the month, we'll have a bunch of planets here in Cancer. And anytime a planet moves into Cancer right now, it's going to, this is really what we need to have on the chart. Anytime a planet comes into Cancer right now, once they move over here, they're going to come into a square with those planets newly in Aries, with Saturn and Neptune newly in Aries, which we're really just sort of getting used to. But it's setting the stage for this new era, sort of in the background, in the collective. And as these planets move into Cancer and come into the square with that Saturn and Neptune, it's going to sort of bring that energy out on a different level and into our lives, right? It could be that the world, I don't know, things are just really changing right now. They really are. And it's a larger shift that takes time. It's certainly very potent and active this summer, but really through 2026, it's a process. And some of these outer planets like Neptune and Pisces, anytime they are making an aspect to a personal planet like Mercury or Mars, they're sort of being activated in our lives in a different way. We actually have something else coming up that's related to this too that I want to show. So that's a little bit of tension. This is a little, I'm sorry, let me finish this and then I'll do the next thing. This is a little bit of tension. We're having to sort of balance that Cancer energy with the Aries energy, and it's like different things trying to get started. Saturn can bring delays and restrictions for our own good. So in some ways, it sort of feels like pulling the reins as our horse is trying to leap. We're sort of excitedly moving into the future, and then that Saturn's just kind of like, whoa there, But in a way, it's good because we want to make sure that we're moving forward in a way that's sustainable, and Saturn's going to help us do that. Saturn's going to make sure we have a plan. And then Neptune in Aries is a beautiful signature in so many ways, and conjunct Saturn is too, but it just sort of can add also like a blurriness or a fogginess to the mix that can make this all sort of like hard to grab onto initially, hard to understand, hard to see this process that we're moving through. So once those planets separate, which will be a while from now, not until 2026 actually, we'll sort of have more clarity. But what I was saying too is not just that there's the tension, but that there is a lot of healing signatures this weekend. And there's one more that I need to point out that's really important actually. So we have Venus now in Taurus. Venus moves into Taurus. I think Venus just moved here on Friday. Today, Friday. This is a chart from Saturday morning. Definitely early part of the weekend. Venus moves into Taurus. It may have even been on Thursday or Wednesday. And when Venus moves into Taurus, she comes into a square with Pluto in Aquarius. I really love Venus in Taurus. This is a really, really nice signature after all of that Venus in Aries energy that we've been having. Venus in Taurus. Oh yeah, it did move in last week, like towards the middle of last week, because now I'm remembering speaking about it in the report from last week. So I'll attach that here too, because there's a bit more about Venus and Taurus. Yeah, it's nice to have a bit of a slowdown after Venus and Aries, after all the process of Venus retrograde. But coming into this square with Pluto is a little bit of tension as well, for the purposes, though, of healing something. Sometimes when Pluto's involved, something that we've sort of kept hidden can come to the surface. Maybe something we've kept hidden from ourselves, or something that we buried and put away. Sometimes I think that Pluto can be about things that we said, okay, yes, I'm settled and I'm done with that. And we sort of moved it off to the side or buried it, but it wasn't really complete. And somehow that wound sort of gets activated again sometimes when Pluto comes up. And that can be painful and difficult, but it's for the purpose of us being able to look at it and heal it and put it back in better shape than it was before. Heal it to another level, and therefore also sort of heal ourselves to another level. So really the main aspect this weekend, and hopefully this is all sort of coming together a little bit. I know it's a bit confusing. Um, but the big aspect this weekend is definitely this Mercury Jupiter conjunction, which could bring about some feelings of clarity, of understanding what we want to do next. Sometimes there could be conversations that really change the way you see things, or it could just be an idea in your head, an new inspired way of thinking that helps you to move an issue forward. Also, just a really powerful time to speak anything into existence, right? To be aware of what our thoughts are manifesting and what our words are manifesting. Next week is really, really interesting because we have all these planets moving into Cancer, and they will square Saturn and Neptune, and we will also have a Sagittarius full moon in just a few days. So we're sort of beginning to build into the energy of that, although the moon is in Scorpio for a lot of the weekend, which can be sort of challenging on Saturday and Sunday. But again, asking us to go deep, asking us to go deep. The moon in Scorpio can be a bit too intense for its own good in some ways. But again, asking us to go deep, asking us to sort of wrap some things up, maybe find some healing for some things that we hadn't been able to before. And if you want to know more about how this is falling in your chart, I covered these aspects in the June reports. I'm actually still finishing up Aries, but if you liked this video, you would likely enjoy the horoscopes on my channel. Best viewed by rising sign, but if you only know your sun sign, you should check that out as well. But if you do happen to know your rising sign, definitely watch my horoscopes for rising sign. And really, for most people, that's true. I'm sorry, I'm in a little bit of a rush this morning, and so I'm not going to go too much into the questions, but I really appreciate all the comments. I appreciate you all being here and watching, and I hope that you have a wonderful weekend.